goody, here it comes.
Welcome to the Cinema Psycho Show.
You are interested in the unknown, the mysterious, the unexplainable. That is why you are here.
Oh my God, don't stop now!
With your hosts, Brian, John, and Elaine.
Welcome to the Cinema Psycho Show, the madhouse for film freaks and film fans of all types. I'm your host, Brian Coddington, joined by my fellow co-hosts and filmmakers, John and Laine Woolscroft.
No snarky comment this week. This episode's going to be a little rough.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. We're usually doing news bits about, the passing of film legends and stuff, and we're right in the middle of it today, kids.
I know we're a couple weeks past, but it took a while for us to kind of...
We need to process
all this. So we're on episode 64, and originally this was actually going to be a Spider-Man Homecoming episode, but in light of the passing of George Romero, who really kind of affected all of us, and on a really deep level, along with pretty much anyone who's an independent filmmaker in Pittsburgh or just an independent filmmaker in general. We felt it was necessary to do an episode solely on him. And, I mean, honestly, that's just kind of what we wanted to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's a bummer, and it's funny because what a day. I mean, because we found out that Romero had passed away, early evening-ish.
Yeah.
John and I were at a concert in New York, and then, a few hours later, we heard about Martin Landau, which was also really sad. And we've mentioned on the show before, we got to meet him in person.
Yep.
Such a nice man. He was so sweet.
I never had the pleasure to meet him.
Yeah, he was really sweet. We had him sign our Ed Wood poster, and just, he was so, gentlemanly. Do you know what I mean? He had such, proper manners. He shook both of our hands, and he just was such a nice man. I feel so bad for his family, it's so sad.
And that would have been rough enough in and of itself, but that on top of Romero, who to me was the whole reason I went into filmmaking, and is probably my favorite filmmaker, and that was just getting punched in the gut.
Well, it's the Pittsburgh connection too, right? That's something that we feel very intensely because it's where we live, it's where we work, it's where we do our creative things, So,
well, I mean, if you're in Pittsburgh or you're from Pittsburgh and you're involved with film, you always go back to Romero because he pretty much laid the groundwork for us.
Well, I mean, it's the blueprint for which every, I think, independent filmmaker wants their career to go, right?
Absolutely.
Because, Romero was able to do his own work on his own terms. He has the cult following, but also widespread, respect. I think it's the kind of career that any independent filmmaker in the beginning independent filmmaker would be proud and happy to have. He's amazing and a legend in his own right now,
Yeah.
We're so sad. Our energy is
literally
so down, guys. This is a bummer.
I think I was
We don't have anything planned, by the way, for this one. This is literally just a
we should kind of let
therapy
you guys
session
know that.
for us.
Yeah, because while this is coming out about a week after his passing, we're recording it kind of right afterwards, and as Brian said, he's extremely, extremely important, to all three of us in this room. Not just we loved him as fans, but also the effect that he had on all of our careers as filmmakers. I think I was about 11 or 12, maybe even 10 when I saw Night of the Living Dead, and I got some of it, but I didn't get all of the underlying subcontext of the film and what it was really saying. But then as I grew older and watched it again and again, I just realized, this film can be used to elevate social change and to bring about a conversation on things, and he never compromised who he was as a filmmaker, which was very important to me. So his films were very much about something, and he shot him here in Pittsburgh. I'm a kind of a loyal guy to the city of Pittsburgh, and obviously I'm a big fan of zombies, and I didn't know if I love him because I'm a big fan of zombies or I love zombies because of him. Because
honestly, you love zombies because the man created the modern version of it. Prior to 1968, zombies were associated with exotic locales and really associated with voodoo. I mean, you had movies like White Zombie with Bela Lugosi. That was the only type of zombie. Romero basically crafted, along with Russ Streiner and John Russo, the archetype that didn't exist. It's literally I feel that this is if we lost Bram Stoker. Bram Stoker created the modern version of a vampire in Dracula. And Romero is in the same realm as him because he created something completely different. It isn't that zombies didn't exist before Romero. They did, but they were completely different.
Yeah, and like you said, to use them as a catalyst and symbol for social change, I think a lot of his work was influenced by, the times and kind of seeing what you could put on screen that then people would reflect. We talk about Night of the Living Dead all the time and the groundbreaking elements to that film that, is way more than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
What is, nice just to kind of go back to the point I was making about that he didn't compromise himself as a filmmaker. He shot the majority of his work here in Pittsburgh, stuck to it in an independent budget so that he didn't have to answer to a studio. It wasn't a matter of, I'm going to make this film. So, back in the 60s and 70s, there weren't comic book movies. But in today's world, I'm just going to make this small independent movie so hopefully I can go off and make the next Marvel movie and, never look back. He, made films that were about something, and he made them locally, and he made them on a shoestring budget, mostly because that allowed him to make the film that he wanted to make without compromising. For me, my Mount Rushmore filmmakers that I look at as who I want to be as a filmmaker is George Romero, John Waters, Roger Corman, and Lloyd Kaufman, and all kind of in the same genre of pushing the boundary, sticking to your roots, sticking to where you started, and making a film about what you want to say. So
I've always felt that George Romero was attainable as an independent filmmaker. We look at a lot of people and we were like, okay, well, there's people like Christopher Nolan, and there's people like Tim Burton, and a lot of filmmakers that they exist solely in that studio system. And they're born of that studio system. I know that Christopher Nolan did independent films and that sort of stuff, but Romero always felt to me like that is the apex of the independent horror filmmaker who's quite literally just raising money on his own, and making his own films the way he or she wants.
And how funny is it that we have the connection to him because of Pittsburgh, because he went to CMU. He's a New Yorker. And that itself should seem unattainable, but it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's stuck in Pittsburgh. From New York State in Pittsburgh. That says something
one
about
of
how
us.
sweet Pittsburgh is.
That's one of us,
Yeah. Until he moved to Toronto. But
American-Canadian filmmaker George Romero.
Yeah.
But and then there's always that great debate. And sorry, Land of the Dead. You're good too, but the great debate, what's better, dawn or night?
For
me, it's night. It's night for me.
Oh, that's a tough one. For me, here's the thing. I used to live down the street from Heaven City Cemetery.
Yeah.
When I lived in Cranberry, our road, quite literally, the back road we would always take to get around Cranberry, Evan City, and Zelienople was 68. And that literally is the road that you see Johnny and Barbara driving on. The bridge that they cross, that's the bridge that I used to cross. So, I've got ties to Evan City and that whole area. But at the same time, I love the messaging in Dawn more.
They really hit you over the head with it, though, don't they?
They do.
In that one, as compared to the subtlety of Night.
They do. Night, what's nice about Night is that it's not going automatically and saying, oh yes, the main character, the protagonist, is a black man and it's 1968. It's very, the sort of tension that you see, it's not hitting you over the head with it. I think that's kind of what you mean. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, they very easily could have said, oh, yeah, we're still in the middle of the civil rights movement. Let's have the white guy be super bigoted, you know, off the bat. And they don't. It's more about those underlying feelings coming out, but not being so over the top and blatant, like, you know, we would automatically think of. But it's just subtle, and it's subversive.
Well, one of the things that, you know, I think is so amazing about the film, and my understanding is that, you know, they wrote the film, they wrote the parts, whatever. They went to go cast it, and, you know, the man that ended up playing the lead,
Dwayne Jones
was just fucking amazing.
Yeah.
And they were like, he's the best man for the part. I don't think that they thought about it in terms of race.
Correct.
No,
They did not go out of their way to cast a black man, but
Right, but they didn't go out of
once
their way
they
to
did-
cast a white guy either, you know, and I think that's what's beautiful about the kind of filmmaking that this was and how this worked with independent filmmaking at the time. They didn't care. And like you said, you know, Brian, like they didn't think like, oh, like we need to play into like what's going on, you know, with the civil rights movement. They just literally let the character be, and, you know, the guy who got it was the guy who got it, and they didn't care, and they were like, this is how it is, you know, and it's cool that we can derive a lot of meaning from those actions, even though the casting was not intentional.
Well, I think the story itself was not intentionally supposed to be, you know, about race relations.
Yeah, and a lot of people see it as, and John, you've said this before, you know, a lot of people see it as a metaphor for, you know, the gay, like, kind of tensions at the time, you know, of being, you know, really closeted and having to stay in the basement, you know, in the closet, you know, behind closed doors and stuff. So, I mean,
because you're not admitting who you really are or what you really feel.
That's interesting. I've never heard
yeah,
that.
you've told me that, John.
Yeah.
theory.
Well, because I'd read some, you know, articles from people who who are homosexual who saw that, you know, and I think because the movie talks about and shows people that are treated as second-class citizens, you know, rising up and kind of taking control, and then those that have the power are ignorant and complacent and are basically sealing their own fates. You can basically put what is, you know, your situation into that. Oh, it's speaking about the, you know, Latinos trying to get into, you know, the culture, Asians, homosexuals, you know, whatever the situation may be, because it's a relatable thing.
It is.
It's an abstract thing, but it you can really put your focus of what your situation is in life in a, you know, and it can also just be young versus old, or progressive versus, you know, conservative. You know, it's. It could just be an ideology in and of itself as well. But Laine, it's funny you should mention that they actually had written the character in the film as kind of a trucker kind of, and he spoke, you know, with very badly. You know, he was not a smart character. And when they casted him, he basically said, "You got to rewrite this," and they agreed. And they basically, you know, had him go 10 levels more intelligent, and just rewrote the dialogue because he was so well spoken and thoughtful and intelligent, and, you know, had such a commanding presence that, you know, oh well, I can't. Well, they flipped my car, and
He was supposed to be a redneck, right?
Redneck, yeah. And it's like this dialogue doesn't make any sense for me, you know. And so they rewrote it, you know, when they cast him. But, you know, they basically said, what if we just don't mention it? What if we don't mention in any way, shape, or form that he's black?
Which is, I think, the best part of the film. And for that to have happened at that time, you know, I mean, we have the immense privilege of living in a completely different era from which this movie came out. I mean, that had to have been a big fucking deal, like, at the time, you know, which is awesome.
If you showed this to sheltered kids now who had no context of history, they would be like, what's the big deal?
Sure.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we're slowly, like, working on this shit.
Yeah.
I worry about the world sometimes, but, I mean...
Well, it's sometimes we go like 10 steps forward and then
Cheeto steps back.
50 steps back.
But yeah, no, and like you said, John, like most people wouldn't bat an eye. I mean, I think kids now would be like, "Oh my god, it's in black and white. Why do you hate me?" You know what I mean? That'd be the concern.
I think kids nowadays, you know, it's also a time capsule of a much slower burn type of horror. You know, we're used to nowadays really fast cuts. We're used to fast zombies. We're used to, over the top gore. We're used to all of this stuff that's like basically bombarding you with senses to the point where you watch a movie like Taken and you've got like 10 to 15 shots to show Liam Neeson like jump over a fence.
Or like the new Bond movies, I can't
Well,
even fucking watch them. I
It's
feel
just
like an old
because
woman.
Liam Neeson couldn't get over a fence, so they had to like just cut it.
Right, but
I have a very specific set of skills, but getting over a fence is not one of them.
Dude, like you want to hate, but I would still hit it if Liam Neeson asked. I would still hit it.
My wrinkly little balls.
I would.
They hang down to my knees.
you want
and
my
are very
Qui-Gon
big.
Jinn.
Don't be jealous, y'all. Don't be jealous.
I'll use my force push on you.
Okay. He has to wear the the Jedi outfit though.
Oh,
Wait, you mean the desert outfit that Uncle Owen wore because they lived in the desert, and then people think that's what Jedis wear because
Why do you
Obi-Wan
crap on my
Kenobi wore
dreams
it?
constantly? Anyway,
Sidetrack.
Romero.
Anyway, I just felt that the pacing was much slower in Night, and
It's lyrical almost.
It is, and the thing is I think modern audiences aren't going to get scared of Night of the Living Dead. It's just not going to happen. It was like I remember people telling me like, "Oh my god, when I first saw this when it came out, it was so terrifying. I had nightmares." And I'm like, "Really?"
Yeah. Oh yeah. When old people.
Yeah, because I'm like, "Really? It's not that scary." I mean, the concept of it is terrifying, but I don't know if I would have nightmares from it. But then I realized it's because I've been exposed to stuff that's like that times 10.
Yeah, very different films. I mean,
So-
things have changed.
Well, he was also one of the first filmmakers to make Us come after Us.
Yes.
It's a giant lizard or a bug, or
the
it's
blob.
Frankenstein. It's
Yeah.
But this is just us waking up and coming to kill each other without any remorse. Like zombies are just Terminators. They will absolutely not stop until you are
They're a
dead.
force of nature. Like that's
Yeah.
the thing, and that's the brilliance of his films. At least in the Dead series, is just the enemy is not the supernatural element. That is something that is out of control from humanity, and that kind of speaks to the things we deal with every day. Climate change, for instance. I mean, you could say, well, we kind of have control of that. We do, but Mother Nature is going to do whatever the fuck she wants to do. She wants to have a hurricane happen or a tornado. There's nothing we can do to stop that.
She is fucking the ice caps
Okay.
right now.
Yeah, she is. But zombies are kind of in that same realm of it tests humans, and the villain ultimately is us. We're the hero and we're the villain.
The monster truly is man.
Yes. And that's the brilliance of those films, is that, I can't really speak to Land of the Dead and those other ones. I mean, I like Land more than, say, Survival or Diary. But the original trilogy really does drive that home.
It was nice. It was the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So
Yep.
he had a different thing to approach in each of them. But I think there's an old saying about genius that when your genius really hits its mark, everything before you seems inconsequential, and everything after you has your mark on it.
Mm-hmm. Seems derivative.
Yeah, and that's George Romero. Everything before him seems pointless, and everything after him is
Romero-esque.
Yeah.
So
What's interesting to know is that he was making, like, before Night of the Living Dead, he made industrial films. He made commercials.
Yeah, for like beer ads and
it
stuff.
was for
right?
beer ads, all sorts of stuff. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's what he cut his chops on.
Getting those like technical things down.
Yeah.
He was a smart man. I mean, you don't get into CMU by being a dummy.
No,
So
you
I mean,
don't.
his pedigree there is evident.
yeah, and it'd be great, to sit here and say, oh, he had this ingenious, like he had a dream when he was 9 years old, and he wrote it down, and he had this script, and he was just sitting on it, and he knew it was the greatest film of all time. We've talked with Russ Streiner, who was a producer,
And
in the
John
film,
Russo.
and John Russo, who was the co-writer of the film, and they basically got together. They said, let's make a film. What do we want to do? What about a western? We don't know anybody that has horses. And like they were joking, they were just thinking, what could we do to make a film? And they said, oh, what about a horror movie? Oh, there's a lot of stuff we can do there, and it just evolved from there. So it's, you kind of think like, oh, because he created the modern zombie genre, that must have just been something that he had just been sitting on.
I think
forever.
that also kind of comes into play with the subtext that we talk about.
Yeah.
I think that stuff is all after the fact. And I know when we've talked to Russ and John, they've even said, they're like, we didn't think of putting all this subtext that a lot of people like pull from. I mean, I think a lot of that comes from the power of the performances that Romero was able to get out of people like Dwayne Jones, you know, and, you know, the other actors involved with the film. Those performances are what create those kind of, you know, themes that we pull out of it.
Well, and I think like when you make a film like that shows just how nasty humanity can be in the heart of the civil rights movement, you know, and Bull Connor and his dogs like going after black people that are just trying to vote, you know, and they're hosing them down, and Bobby Kennedy's dead, Martin Luther King's dead, and you know, it's going to come out even almost subconsciously.
Yeah,
you know, you're gonna, if you got the balls, you're gonna make a movie, even if you don't mean to, that's gonna say something about the world that you're living in, because how can you not when things were so turbulent at that time? But I feel we could talk about Night of the Living Dead forever. Let's kind of look at the brevity of the man's work here.
Yeah, definitely.
Because right after Night of the Living Dead, he really departed. You know, because I'd say more than 90% of his work is based in the horror genre. And if you haven't seen some of these movies, do yourself a favor, go out and see them. They're amazing. If you've only seen his zombie movies, there's so much more to Romero that you should check out. But there's Always Vanilla was his second movie, which is more of a like a romance and kind of a surreal kind of film.
Yeah,
and just didn't really work. The audiences didn't connect with it, and he kind of went right back to the genre with Season of the Witch, and then a film that was pretty, I'd say, cult popular, and I enjoyed it quite a bit, was The Crazies.
Oh, I love The Crazies.
Yeah. And then the remake wasn't even that bad.
The remake was pretty bad.
It could have been worse.
Here's the thing. For me, The Crazies is special because they filmed that in my high school.
Did they really?
I didn't know that. The science lab was our chemistry lab. And like, because they filmed that whole thing in Evan City.
Right.
So the science lab was my chemistry lab in like junior high. And, it was in intermediate high school. Because that back then they didn't have a senior high; they just had like the intermediate high school. That was the whole high school. But yeah, you could literally see the locker colors, and they were the same, decades later.
That's so trippy.
So like that part is hits home for me. But I love The Crazies again because it's at a time when like that was 73. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're right in Nixon era stuff going on. And again, you're dealing with, the government is testing stuff, is gassing, populations.
Agent Orange.
Yeah. And what's the cleanup for it? So, that's kind of the interesting thing about that film.
Yeah. And just a deeply disturbing film, especially with where they just went all for it. With the incest scene.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah. The idea is that, people that take in this gas, like, it just makes them become violent and out of control. And basically their id takes over and they want just whatever they want. And you kind of lose connection to any of your actual humanity or your personality. And so when this father, takes in too much of this, he just sees he sees a pretty woman and his id tells him, oh, have sex with it. That's all he sees and feels, not realizing it's his daughter, and she's trying to fight him off, and he's just trying to go to Pound Town. It's just kind of really, really unsettling scene. Yeah, but they pushed the envelope quite a bit.
I mean, that was Richard Liberty right there. Yeah. Creepy fucker. Great actor. Creepy as all hell though. But The Crazies, great film.
Probably, just to jump ahead a little bit on its timeline here, probably my favorite non-zombie related George Romero movie, Martin.
Oh my God.
The understated vampire movie.
Love Martin. And there's so many people I know who still haven't seen it.
If you haven't seen it, go see it.
Like there are people when you mention, oh, what's your favorite vampire movie? And you might say, oh, Martin. And they're just like, what the hell's that?
Isn't that his own favorite of his films?
It is.
Yeah.
It
should be. Yeah.
It is. But it's so good because it kind of goes back and forth in context of, is he a real vampire? Is he not? Is he just a crazy person who is pretending to be a vampire? And you've got the crazy uncle who keeps feeding the fantasy, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it's so good. Also, I think that's the first time he met Tom Savini,
I believe that.
because Savini's in the film.
Yeah, and it was from there that he kind of recruited him for Dawn of the Dead. Now, Brian, you love Tom Savini, right?
For fuck's sake, why do you keep bringing this up?
When we weren't recording, you said that he's like a father to you. But moving on. Brian,
No, he's
it's
not.
okay. It's okay that you don't have to admit it on the air. We'll probably just edit all this later.
I'm the one who does the editing, jackass.
Oh, shots fired.
Well, I'm just going to pepper it in then every 5 seconds. No, yeah, but obviously then he worked with Savini on Dawn of the Dead, which we've touched on. A lot of people loved this one. I liked it, but I'll leave it just at that. Night Riders, which has a very bizarre Stephen King cameo in it.
My dad was apparently in Night Riders.
Really?
Yeah.
That's random.
He was
As
like
an extra,
as
or-
an extra.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was an extra in Night Riders. I haven't actually seen Night Riders. I've heard about it and heard it was crazy. Wasn't like motorcycle jousting?
Yeah, and they kind of... They're
That's pretty much
motorcycle
what the movie
gang.
is, right?
That's
Like
amazing.
motorcycle jousting.
Yeah, they're a motorcycle gang that kind of like live by the honor of like the Knights of the Old Republic, you know.
Yeah.
It's a weird movie, and it has like fat Stephen King in it, like, and that's where George Romero and Stephen King are really good friends. And apparently, in Romero's house, he has behind a glass case every novel Stephen King ever wrote.
Wow.
Yeah, including Gerald's Game. So that's an interesting book. Yeah, so that's where they spark up a friendship, because I think like King was just coked out of his mind and walked onto the set, and George Romero was like, "Hey, stick around, we'll put you in the movie." And while they're doing the jousting, like he's playing this character that's second guessing everything about like, oh, it's all a trick. You know, they're not really using, real jousting, weapons, and the motorcycles are fake. Just like kind of almost comic relief. I'm just watching it for the first time. I was like, is that fucking Stephen King? The hell? What is he doing in this movie? But yeah, they
That was like one of the first times he ever popped in one of his movies, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because it's funny. Interestingly enough, Creepshow was the next movie that he did.
Oh,
with
yeah.
Not only Stephen King writing, but acting again.
Sort of.
Because I guess he's an actor.
No, I love that particular
Creepshow is
vignette.
great.
Yeah.
No, but the whole movie is fantastic. But the Gordy Vale, oh you lunkhead, like that whole vignette where he gets turned into a plant monster is so good.
If you want to see Leslie Nielsen try to kill Ted Danson, this is the movie for you.
Yeah, dude, that's gonna be the weirdest part of that movie. That is so bizarre because I don't know, just like, especially too when you see this shit as an adult. Because like I saw Creepshow as an adult, and I was like, this is hurting so many parts of my brain because I've seen Leslie Nielsen and Ted Danson in like so much other shit. I'm like, I think my brain's gonna short out. Like, it's so weird.
What's fun about Creepshow is that it came out in 1982, so it's right at the cusp of we're leaving the wacky 70s and going into the 80s. So everyone's they're still got like the gold like necklaces,
So
and
attractive.
so many earth tones. It's just funny. Like, I know I was watching Creepshow the first time, I was just like, why is Leslie Nielsen wearing a leisure suit and he's got a gold chain around his neck? And like, it just doesn't work. And then you realize, oh, it's in that little gap of time where we were coming out of disco era and going into, punk era.
The coke was wearing off.
The coke was wearing off.
Well, every decade's like that. The beginning of every decade
Yeah.
is a little bit like the decade that came
Yes.
before.
And a lot of people have said that Romero kind of revitalized the help me guys.
Horror anthology?
The horror anthology, yeah. Sorry about
Yeah.
that brain fart.
Yeah.
Yeah, the horror anthology film in this country. It's still fairly popular, in Europe and other places, but it kind of brought it back to life. No pun intended. In
That was a good pun, though, dude.
in the United States. So not only did he kind of, create the zombie franchise, but he brought back the horror anthology as its own thing. So hey, Steven Spielberg and Joe Dante with your Twilight Zone the movie, you would be nothing without Romero. Nothing. You big
Not a
wigs.
goddamn thing.
And Creepshow's a hell of a lot better than Twilight Zone the movie.
Except for Creepshow 2. We don't need to talk about that.
We don't need to talk about that.
And then Day of the Dead completed his original trilogy. A very bizarre movie, Monkey Shines. I'm just hitting the big ones here.
I never saw Monkey Shines.
I didn't see it either.
It's about a helper monkey that wants to kill people. It's like Chucky with a monkey.
Oh, charming.
I mean, that kind of came out the same year as Child's Play, 88.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll just assume they copied him here. The Dark Half was another collaboration with
Dark Half I
Stephen
actually
King.
like. A lot of people don't like the Dark Half, though.
Yeah, it's based off a Stephen King novel. So once again, their huge friendship continues. I barely remember Dark Half.
That was just with Timothy Hutton, and he has a doppelganger.
right.
Like, that's pretty much it. I mean, he basically, he's a writer, and he births this darker side of him that's committing murders and things like that, and eventually, they kind of have a face-off thing. It's an interesting movie. I think that actually was filmed in Pittsburgh as well. But it's not for everybody.
Yeah. Then he kind of slowed down for quite
He
a
did.
bit. And then he did his second zombie trilogy, which
Listen to you.
I love me some Romero, love him to death, but these movies are not great.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of, as I've always said, filmmaking is a young man's game, and
I still don't totally agree with that. I still don't. I just think, like Land of the Dead, because that's really what you're talking about here. That's the first one.
yeah, Land
Land of the Dead is, no, I'd say it's the better of the three.
Yes,
That's what I would say. It's the better of the three. It still tries to.
it's the Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, exactly. It's if
sorry,
you're gonna-
George.
Sorry, buddy. But yeah, it's the better of the three. But it at the same time, it kind of takes the whole income inequality message, which is pretty much what this one was supposed to be about. Every zombie movie that Romero has done, he's tried to inject that social commentary, and it became more and more heavy-handed as he kind of goes along. Like, Day of the Dead was really about military-industrial complex and how the 80s became all about, America and patriot, military might, our action heroes were huge and that sort of thing.
And how we attacked tiny little islands.
How we attack tiny little islands for just no apparent reason. Dawn was about commercialism. Night was, we can take the idea that's about, racism or even communism. And Land was kind of this weird one where it's like, it's about class warfare and the 1%. And the problem with it, though, is it kind of is extremely heavy-handed. Extremely. And it's not made in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
That's a big thing too. I really don't like the fact that it's not made in Pittsburgh. I know he went out of his way to make Toronto look like Pittsburgh. Like, seriously, if
We
you
appreciate
watch
the
it,
effort.
I really do appreciate the effort. You name names of streets in Pittsburgh. You name, I think he mentioned Mount Washington in one. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, but that's in Pittsburgh and you're in Toronto. So it's like, you can even see like the Three Rivers in going into the Steel Tower, and you're just like, that's in Pittsburgh, but why are you not filming here? So I know it was cost. I know at the time when Land was in production, that was 2004, 2003, and we really didn't get our shit together on the whole film tax credit at that time, and we kind of lost Land of the Dead to Toronto because of it.
Right.
And I think a lot of people who are proponents of the film tax credit kind of credit losing a George Romero film to kind of kickstarting the need for that film tax credit.
Yeah, it's true.
But it's not the greatest
Yeah.
zombie movies. And they kind of went downhill from there.
Yeah, and then we had his whole, first person point of view movie from a
Diary of the Dead.
yeah, from a handy cam, and
Yeah.
I think it was George trying to be hip, and I've teased him for this in the past, and anytime I've teased George Romero, it was out of love, but
So
just
much love.
just if he was still going today, it'd probably just be like, what's gonna Snapchat zombie?
Well,
Gonna tweeting zombie?
I mean, after Diary, he had Survival of the Dead, which I'm sorry, I hate.
I hate that movie.
I got through that, but I'm just like, so it's like Scottish zombies in Hatfield McCoys. Like, I didn't get it.
Well, it's all for the last shot when there's zombies and they still hate each other. It's to show the banality of just that, of a lifetime of just hate each other. Was it an Israel-Palestine kind of thing? Is that what it's trying to do there?
Like that? I just know it was for me. It felt like, oh, it's zombies with Hatfield and McCoy's families battling it out. You know, that sort of shit on an island. And I didn't get it. And I think honestly at that point, you know, that was what, 2009. That was right when zombies were starting to really explode the second time around with, you know,
Dawn of the
Walking
Dead remake, Walking Dead,
yeah. So I mean, those kind of took over, and unfortunately, you know, I think Romero kind of got left on the back burner when it comes to his own zombie films because of
everybody started playing with his toys.
That's exactly what it was.
It's true.
And it's like, hands off my fucking toys. But I mean, he did a couple things after that. He was an executive producer on Dead Time Stories, and he was scheduled.
That was shot around here, though.
That was shot around here, and with people that we know.
Your best friend Tom Savini.
Why are you doing that?
Don't get him started, John.
Do I have to go through why I don't like Tom Savini?
It's like giving a little kid a chocolate bar right before bed. You know exactly what's going to happen.
Do I seriously have to go through why I don't like Tom Savini?
Moving on.
You called him a genius before.
I never have called him a
Moving
genius.
on.
Okay, so moving on, he was scheduled to basically work on his next Dead film, which he actually wasn't going to direct. He was going to produce it, and this was going to be Road of the Dead. And, I mean, that was literally announced, I'd say, a week or so before he passed. He was talking about it beginning of, I think, either beginning of July or later June. So that's where we're left. I hope they complete it.
Yeah.
You know?
In his honor here, just, you know, go ahead and finish that up.
Yeah.
In his memory. Yeah. I hope they do complete it too.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I rarely say this because I don't like to call the shots, you know, like a Babe Ruth or something, but I don't think we'll ever see another George Romero like that.
I mean, it's a cultural icon,
Yeah.
you know, and there can only be one George
Yeah.
Romero, you know.
Well, you look at something like Sundance. When that started up, it was to show independent films.
Yeah.
You know, but things that had the budget of like $9,000, and you know, to get noticed that maybe you would have a chance. You know, a lot of people work for Roger Corman, like, you know, invite you, hey, come work on my like crappy film, and if you can make it not as crappy, maybe we can get you some work out, you know, outside of working for me. But now you look at Sundance, and a independent film is a $15 million budget. So, you know, if that's what's considered independent these days, I'm just using Sundance as, you know, an example, then I don't think we'll ever see a George Romero anymore, because no distributor who has any merit is going to give time or consideration to something that was shot like Night of the Living Dead, or even, you know, look at a movie like when he had level of success like Martin, Dawn, Day. These movies are still no budget. You know what I mean? Yeah. He never got the budget that he deserved, and I think that was somewhat purposeful. But yeah, you'll never see him because of his genius, but also just because I just don't think that world really exists for independent filmmakers.
I think it exists.
Maybe the internet.
That was what I was going to say. I don't think it exists in mainstream film. I don't think it exists in quote unquote indie film. I think it exists for internet. I think it exists for web series. It's becoming increasingly difficult. One, because of prevalence of technology. You know, I can use my iPhone and I could, you know, make a 4K film on an iPhone, which is crazy.
It is crazy, dude.
You know, and
what Len had talked about, like, unless you could afford actual film, because you didn't want to shoot on VHS or beta, then you're screwed.
But now, I mean, it's a double-edged sword, because the positive is, yes, I can easily make a 4K film on my iPhone, But the other side of that is everyone can make a 4K film on their iPhone. So you got a lot of people who are making a lot of movies.
And the question becomes, should you make a 4K film on your iPhone?
Correct. But it also becomes, how the hell does my little zombie film, or let's say I'm making the next Night of the Living Dead. Maybe I'm creating a new character that has never existed before. Or I'm doing a new spin on an old character like Romero did. How the hell does that rise above the cacophony of other stuff that is competing for the same couple distributors?
How are you heard above the noise?
How are you heard above them? And that's why I say it's not with Sundance. It's not with even Slamdance, because Slamdance used to be the non-Sundance Sundance. And now it's become Sundance. You know, like, I don't even, when I'm in the process right now of submitting to film festivals for the short film I did for the Atrocity Exhibition. And I'll be honest with you, Sundance isn't on the radar on it. You know why? Because it's literally like I'm throwing money away.
There's no point.
There's no point in it. Okay?
Yeah.
And they'll swear up and down, oh, we look at all our movies, blah, blah, blah. No, you don't.
You could be Clerks.
No one could be Clerks. Even Kevin Smith has said, you're not going to be Clerks. That was a different era. That was the late 80s, early 90s. There's no way in hell that you're going to be Robert Rodriguez making El Mariachi and for $7,000 and get it picked up. Okay?
Yeah.
It's just the buyers don't... They're seeing a million films, like over a million films every year. And honestly, unless you know somebody up there or you've got a sales agent already lined up who's done private meetings with those people, you're not going to get picked up for them. No. You know, the future is not with them. The future is internet. It's making small, easily digestible web series. That's really where it's at. That's why Netflix is cleaning house. That's why Amazon is cleaning house.
Hulu.
You know,
everybody.
I mean, the film festivals are great. I'm not going to dog film festivals. I'm just going to say that it's great to get your name out there, but you're not going to get a distribution deal. You're not going to be that road.
And the episodic stuff is so much more critically acclaimed than it was before. I mean, I remember a time when TV was derided, but I mean, not only is TV a more legitimate medium, but these networks, you know, or unnetworks, if you will, are coming out with this stuff. I mean, have you seen the Emmys list of all the nominations? It is not a lot of network.
Right.
It's not.
But, I mean, there's a danger with Netflix and Amazon as well.
Sure.
Is that, okay, the shows that you're seeing, are they made by people like us?
Yeah, exactly.
No, they're not.
House of Cards is not.
Okay.
No.
They're usually
I tried calling
tied.
Kevin Spacey. He didn't call me back.
Yeah, but they're usually tied with big names.
Yeah.
And that's the fear I have, is that the studios are going to wise up and be like, oh, well, yeah, we'll just treat it kind of like how Sundance was. Where, oh yeah, it starts off where you've got the internet and you can get whatever you want out there. But now I'm going to have everything backed by studio. I'm going to have big name stars in it with big name directors, and they're going to take over. And that's really where that's going to be. And the distribution mediums of Netflix and Amazon and all those things will be closed off to people like us.
Yeah.
That's the fear I have, is that they'll wise up.
And I think that's what we really need to take from a filmmaker like Romero. You know, John has said it a couple of times, but I think it's really worth repeating. I mean, it's why you've got to make your content and you've got to make your work, and you shouldn't compromise on your vision. I mean, there's things to compromise on. I'm not saying you should be like a bullheaded asshole, but you know what I mean? Like, you need to make your films your way, because at the end of the day, I mean, you have to do this for the pure passion of it, because the idea that you could become the next George Romero is so remote. You have to do work that makes you happy, because, I mean, that's why we do it. Not because we want to be famous or rich, but because we want to. We have to. You know, we
there are people out there who that's the sole purpose, though.
Sure. I mean,
You know.
but I mean, I was just speaking for like us.
But for us, yeah, you're absolutely correct. I mean, if I wanted to be rich, I wouldn't be doing film. That's pretty much how it works. But I mean, I just look at it as Romero really was one of a kind. And he stood out in, you know, I look at him kind of in the same way as almost like Wes Craven. You know, Wes Craven was the same sort of beast. And it was sad to lose him too. But these are people who did not have nearly as much as we have now, and their ingenuity and their creativity was enough to craft a legacy that will reverberate long after they're gone.
Absolutely.
Even after generations don't even realize how much effect that they've had.
Of course.
You know, it's like when you skip a stone and it has like 10 ripples. You know, if you get a really good one, you know, the 10th ripple down the way, you might not even remember the first ripple. But that first ripple was Romero.
Yeah. And it's going to take a while, but you know, we've kind of started now, you know, with saying goodbye.
So
thank you, George.
Thank you, George.
Laine, where can they find you at on the Twitter?
You can find me at LA_Croft.
John?
You can find me at Brian Connington Savini Lover 95.
Shut the fuck up.
I mean the Unreal J Wolves. That's your Twitter handle. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you can find me at Brian Connington. I also run the Psycho Show Twitter. Be sure to like us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Google Plus at Psycho Show. You can find us on the Epicast Network at epicastnetwork.com. If you have a favorite movie or question you want to throw our way, or you want to, you know, lament Romero's passing with us, you can contact us at cinemapsychoshow.com. And make sure to subscribe to us on iTunes. Send us a rate, send us a review. We love to get those. Definitely shows us how we're doing and how the show, you know, is going. And catch our new episodes available every Sunday.
When there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth.
Epicast.